Hi, do you
Hello,
hear me?
hello. Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I'm really pleased and happy to have you on this Instagram Live.
Thank you.
Can you please start with introduction? I'm not sure that everybody knows who you are and what you do.
So my name is Hillel Neuer, and I'm the executive director of United Nations Watch. We are a human rights group based in Geneva, Switzerland, and we seek to uphold the values of the UN and see to it that the UN lives up to its charter principles. So when, for example, the United Nations decides to elect the Islamic regime of Iran 2 years ago to the UN Commission on Women's Rights, we were the first organization to expose it and to call for it to be removed, something that, with the help of many others, we succeeded to do. So we're active on a range of human rights issues. Every year we bring human rights heroes from some of the worst dictatorships: China, Russia, Syria, Venezuela, and Iran. So 15 years ago, we had Ahmad Batebi, and we had Masih Alinejad, and the families of political prisoners. And so I'm very happy to be meeting with you and helping to work on the cause for freedom for the people of Iran.
I'm really glad to hear you speak about the cruelty that the Iranian regime does to its own people is shameful in so many ways. From your perspective, how has the Western countries responded to the protests that has been going on through the years, but especially now after Mahsa Amini's death?
Look, I think there's been an evolution. If we look to what the situation was a few years ago, we were just a few voices in the darkness. I remember in the protests of 2019 and others, it was around the end of December and New Year's more than once, end of 2019 and maybe it was the end of last year. I don't remember anymore, but I remember, there were people that I follow like Masih Alinejad and others. We were tweeting about hundreds of people being killed and 1,500 people being killed, terrible things happening. And the United Nations, they were on holiday. They couldn't care less. This was the time of Nikki Haley. So this must have been maybe maybe it was in 2018, 2017 or 2018, there were protests. And she called an urgent session in New York, Ambassador Nikki Haley, the US ambassador at the time. And none of the European countries were interested. There was a meeting of the Security Council, and they said, well, we don't really want to get involved. And it was really shameful. So there was, I would say, up until 6 months ago, there was the feeling that the European countries and to some degree, the democratic administration, to some degree, were not really interested in talking about human rights in Iran. They did a little bit. There was an annual resolution introduced by my country, Canada, at the General Assembly. But in terms of an emergency session, they didn't want to talk about it. They said it's all about the nuclear and we don't want to hear about human rights. And just to give the United States as an example, when Iran regime was elected, Islamic regime in Iran was elected in April 2021 to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And when we exposed it, when the Associated Press, Matthew Lee, turned to Ned Price, the State Department spokesman, and he said, Mr. Price, what does the United States have to say about the election of the Islamic Republic of Iran to the UN Commission on the Status of Women? He said, well, some countries sometimes get elected to certain bodies, and we know that countries that are not democracies, and we don't like it. And he said, no, I'm asking you a specific question. Do you condemn the election yesterday of the Islamic Republic of Iran? And Alireza, I'm sad to say, but the United States government would not answer the question. You could see the video. People who want to watch it, we posted it a few months ago. The United States State Department was dodging a very simple question. And it was so shameful. And I could see there how the US government clearly had a policy of appeasement. The great US, the leader of the free world, could not condemn one of the worst, if not the worst, regimes when it comes to subjugating women, oppressing women, raping women protesters, couldn't condemn them. So that was, I would say, up until 6 months ago, there was a policy of appeasement. And thankfully, sad that it took all of this, but thankfully, we see a change. And obviously, the United States decided to lead the effort to expel the Iran regime from the Women's Rights Commission. It was successful on December 14th. And the European countries, and with this I'll conclude, we see an evolution, we see change, we see advance, but we're clearly not there yet. We're clearly not there yet. And, you know, I'm looking forward to joining you in Brussels on Monday. And it's our job to bring the European Union where they need to go, where they need to get to.
From your perspective, you have a lot of meetings with high-level profiles, politicians from different countries. What is the main objective for Europeans to not take these steps yet?
Well, you know, there's things they say publicly and things that we can detect from our own observations. Publicly, they say they still want the nuclear deal. They say they want to keep the door open. They still maintain diplomatic relations with Iran. So that often is their public stance. And of course, what we detect is that there still are significant, in some cases, trade, certain countries with Iran, that they have many problems on their plate. They have Ukraine, it's a very big problem, still coming back from the pandemic and many things, and it's just another headache. And I think they are afraid that the Iranian regime is threatening war against so many countries. And I think that they would, if there's a way to kick the problem down the road, let someone else deal with it in 5 years' time, that's what they prefer. And I don't think that's the right way.
And for many Iranians and people living in the Western countries with Iranian roots, is there any lobby organizations that you know of that are really active in favor for the Islamic Republic, or is there trade routes that need to be acknowledged and addressed?
Well, I don't know about Europe, to be honest. I know that in the United States and Washington, there are still groups that obviously everyone knows about NIAC, but there are other groups that are connected to them. There was an article about a week ago in an online news site called the Free Beacon, and they have a particular perspective. They are Republican and they have a ideological perspective, but I don't think that they made up this story. It was about how an email was sent by various groups connected to the Open Society Institute, which is connected to George Soros, which may do good work for democracy in Hungary and other places, but on the issue of Iran have not been very helpful. They've supported the nuclear deal and have opposed taking a strong stand. So there was an email that went to various groups. One of them was Human Rights Watch was on the email. One of them was a group that's supposed to be Jewish, but doesn't really act in a very pro-Jewish way. And I say that as a Jewish person, called J Street. The people there were connected. They're all connected to a certain, I would say, left-wing democratic view that has been very, very supportive of appeasement and supported the nuclear deal. And in the email, they said, look, we're having a hard time now because our approach of diplomacy is on the defensive, but we need to figure out a new way to frame how to go ahead with the nuclear deal. And obviously that means taking a very weak position on defending the protesters who are risking their lives. So I think the moment that you say, I put human rights on pause, I think there's something wrong with your position. And as Masih Alinejad and others have said, that if you want to solve the nuclear problem, you need to remove this regime. This regime, you cannot trust them. And this notion that you make a deal with them at this regime, that you see what they do to their own people, what do you think they want to do to people who are their enemies, who are not their own people? I mean, I think it's absurd.
We had a big gathering in Strasbourg, 16th of January. The 19th, we have a historic resolution in the European Parliament. What is your professional opinion about the resolution, and its impact on the dynamic of European policies against the Islamic Republic?
Look, I think it's a very important step. I think the gathering that you had in Strasbourg made a very strong impression. We have to keep in mind that the European leaders, when you see people coming on the streets, showing up for something, that's not obvious. A lot of people do not show up for a lot of issues. When you have tens of thousands of people, and I don't know how many we're expecting to see in Brussels, is it 50,000, hopefully?
Hopefully.
Yeah. So, I've seen the advertisements for buses coming from Geneva and Milan and Germany and all across Europe. When, politicians see that, you're a politician. Politicians see that. And I believe that, Germany, the reason that German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock initiated the UN special session on Iran in November, I don't think it's accidental that it happened after 100,000 people gathered in Berlin. I think that made an impression on her. So I believe that the resolution and the rallies that are being held, if it's in Strasbourg or Paris and coming up on Monday, the 20th of February in Brussels at 11:30 a.m., I think they're extremely important. I think they do help to shape public awareness and consciousness, to say that a lot of people took the trouble to take a bus overnight, all night, to show up in cold weather and stand up for something. I think that world leaders take notice. So the resolution, I don't know what the legal effect was, but I think in terms of mobilizing consciousness, it creates pressure. It's not enough, but it's a very important step that I think we are beginning to see an evolution of opinion, and clearly there's more to go.
I agree with you totally. The resolution has no legal fences that we can rely on. But from my perspective, why I did my best to make it happen, it was because to change the dynamic of this game, to put more pressure on the European countries, especially Germany and France, who have especially strong trade ties with the Islamic Republic. From your perspective, when do you think that Europeans are ready to take that step? Because the 20th of February, I have many questions about that meeting. We know that they are not going to implement this resolution. Perhaps they will add a few more sanctions on individuals, but the resolution as full, when do you think Europe is ready to take those steps?
There's no way to predict precisely. I think it may depend on what happens in the region. It's quite possible that if we see further developments in the region that capture the world's attention, that may be a factor. We've seen in the past few months how, certainly I know in America, and I think to some degree in Europe, the pictures of so many women suddenly taking off the hijab, speaking up for women's rights, which all of us in the West claim to be part of our raison d'etre, part of our credo, is the rights of women, the rights of minorities, the rights of those who are historically more vulnerable and oppressed. And to see the courage that these women had, and men, of course, but the very stark images of the women, I think it made a powerful impression, especially on the left side of the spectrum, which for some strange reason, and politics are strange, but for some strange reason, it became a thing in America that if you criticize the Islamic Republic, maybe it means you're criticizing Islam, and we don't want to be Islamophobic. So there was a whole spectrum of opinion that didn't want to touch it. And I think that's, in the past few months, there's clearly a change. Someone like Masih Alinejad, who, for many people know this, but I'll just repeat it, that 2 times in the past year or two, she's been targeted for kidnapping and assassination. As early as past July, 3 men gangsters hired by the Iranian Islamic regime. One of them came to her house with a machine gun and was part of a gang based in Iran that came to assassinate her. And he was arrested not far from her house with a machine gun, and he had come to her house with a gun, and there was a bullet. There was a bullet in the barrel of the gun. It was the gun was loaded. So they came to assassinate her, and I think, and despite that, there were people up until a year ago that they didn't want to hear about it. And criticizing Islamic Republic, maybe that's criticizing Islam. I think it was very silly ideas. And of course, Masi always said she stands up for her mother who wears the hijab. She stands up for women in France who may want to wear a burkini or whatever it is. But she should have the right. Women in Iran should have the right to dress how they like. Freedom goes both ways for everyone. But still, they up until 6 months ago, up until Mahsa Amini, there was this real hesitation. It was taboo, almost taboo, I would say, for the mainstream media in America. Not everyone, but a large degree. And now we see a change. We see that she's invited to many places, and I'm sure you yourself, I'd be interested actually to hear from you. Maybe you could share with me, someone who's been outspoken on Iran. Do you see the change within Europe? Are there mainstream voices that are willing to talk about what's happening in Iran more than before?
I can be totally honest. 5 months ago, even I wasn't engaged to Iran question. I didn't see any possibilities to change the policies, to be honest. But sometimes things happens, and my eyes was open, and I saw an opportunity to contribute to this path. I'm a member of a liberal party since 21 years ago. For me, freedom, equality, gender equality, freedom of speech, rights for minority is inside my body. And when I see these violations, the terrible images was sent out, it has been 5 really difficult months emotionally. And we started in Sweden, try to change the policies with the new government. Unfortunately, when I called him to the parliament, he didn't want to take any responsibility at all, Mr. Billström.
This is your prime minister?
No, the foreign minister, Tobias Billström. And he wanted, I assume, to continue at business as usual. And but in a few times he repeated the sentence who I marked, that Europe needs to take these steps together. And that's why I turned out to the European Parliament, because for me it was the easiest body to move. Directly after Ms. von der Leyen went out from the Commission, the second body, and told the exactly same thing that the Parliament has been saying. And now, in these steps, we need to make sure that we change the foreign minister's point of view. In the end, I think that this policy change need to go through the prime minister's level, because it's so significant that foreign ministers doesn't have the mandate to act on this. But my main goal with 20th of February in Brussels is to show how important this issue is, both for the Iranian diaspora. We are 2-3 million in Europe, several million in North America, and how important this issue is for us, and also the 85 million prisoners who lives in Iran right now. And hopefully when they see this big rally, they will understand that we are not going to back down, and they need to implement the resolution. I hope I really hope that we will reach our goal, not the 20th of February, that's just a pressure point, but before the summer at least. We have this is a new information for most. I'm planning the next rally, the 23rd and 24th of March, to make sure, because then the prime ministers will have a meeting in Brussels, and I'm also booking a lot of meetings behind the scenes with the European leaders within the next few weeks to make sure that we put all the pressure that is necessary to make sure that we can change the policy. But it's going a little bit too slow for my taste, to be honest.
I hope that certain events will at least mobilize the Iranian diaspora and also give strength to the 85 million prisoners in Iran. That on Friday we had this tremendous display of unity to see Reza Pahlavi and Masih Alinejad and Nazanin Boniadi and Hamid Ismailian and Golshefte on video, and Shirin Abadi. That to me seemed like a very important event that inspired a lot of people and showed that there is a unity happening, some organization happening. So to me, that was a very important milestone. This week is the Munich Security Conference, right? Is that happening this week?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, as you know, historically, they would invite Javad Zarif, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic. This year, they're inviting, is it Masih Alinejad? Is it Hamid? Who else is invited? Yeah.
And Mr. Pahlavi.
And Mr. Pahlavi. So that's a huge change from a very important establishment landmark event of the year. That they don't have the regime, and instead they have the anti-regime. We had, a few months ago, but President Macron inviting Masih Alinejad and Ladan Borumand and Roya Pirae to meet with him and saying very important messages on his Twitter account. We have the upcoming event in Brussels on Monday, 20th of February. Very important event to gather people to demand that IRGC be listed as terrorists. And as someone who's based in Geneva, I, of course, am going to mention the 27th of February, 2 weeks from today, when the Foreign Minister Amir Abdollahian will be coming to the Human Rights Council, a body that is the world's highest human rights body, and the regime that beats, blinds, jails, rapes, tortures, kills women protesters, will be giving a major address before this council. Now, I want to be clear. Every country is invited. Every foreign minister gets invited. So I understand people ask me, why is he invited? Every foreign minister is invited. However, it's impossible to be indifferent to the fact that what this regime is doing, we're seeing the horrible images of women who are being shot in the eye and other terrible images, women being raped. The idea that we should just be silent is unacceptable. And that is why we are demanding that all democracies that consider themselves to be supporters of human rights, decent, civilized countries, must walk out of the room. We're not asking for something new. Last year, Sergei Lavrov came to Geneva by video. He couldn't come because his plane couldn't fly to Geneva because of European sanctions. Very good. I wish the same would be for Iran. How come Sergei Lavrov's plane couldn't make it to Geneva, but the Iranian can fly all the way to Geneva from Iran, from Tehran, and nothing stopping him? I think that's a very good question we have to ask the European countries. But when Lavrov spoke via video, the ambassadors got up and walked out. I posted the video on my Instagram. You could see it. Dozens and dozens, 100 diplomats walked out of the room. 40 countries, 100 diplomats, one after the other after the other. It happened last year. They did it with the Lavrov. We're demanding the same thing for the regime that is arming Lavrov. The Russia's newest attack on the Ukrainians is with drones. They need the Islamic Republic's drones. And this regime kills its own people. It helps Russia kill Ukrainian people. We are demanding hashtag walk out our IRI. What you did for Lavrov last year, you must do it again. February 27th, every country, every foreign minister, every ambassador should walk out of the room. So I think we've seen some momentum diplomatically. Munich this week, Friday in Georgetown in Washington, and thousands of people gathered in Paris, coming in Brussels. I see momentum, and of course, on the ground in Iran, many people have been subjugated and repressed, and it's winter, and they don't have money. It's complicated, but I feel there is a momentum.
Yeah, I have one comment and one last question, because I know that you are really busy. I'm really grateful that you took your time. It seems that we need to throw a big email campaign and make sure that our Western politicians will leave the room on the 27th. I know that a few of my colleagues are in this live Instagram. You know what I want from you. So I will call you tonight and set this up. And my last question is, from your experience perspective, do you have any advice for me and other engaged people within the Iran issue, how we can maintain this pressure? What do we need to do better in the upcoming months to make sure that we will have the regime change in the end?
Look, from what I see, in the end, the Iranian people will have to make the decision, and these are difficult things to predict. No one knew that the Soviet regime would fall. It fell because at some point internally no one believed in it anymore. I think it's a bit different in Iran because you do have a small hard core that does believe in it. It may be, I don't know if the number is 5%, maybe it's 10%, but you do have a certain percentage. So it's a bit more difficult. In the Soviet Union, no one believed in the communist lie anymore. But obviously in Iran, you're going to need at some point within the regime, you're going to need some people within the army, within the police, within government to start shifting away. That's something we're going to have to look for. Abroad from the diaspora, we have to do what we can to make sure our governments do the right thing. And I think that means constantly requesting meetings with members of parliament, the continuation of the rallies. It means those who can write articles for newspapers, what we call an op-ed, an editorial, to put the positions of our governments. If our governments are, not walking out of the room on the 27th of February, if they're not putting IRGC on the terrorist list, if they're not telling their ambassador in Tehran to walk away from the 44th anniversary of the regime, all these different points, we need to keep pushing and pressing and making sure that the world knows about it. And I think that's, these are some of the things. Obviously, there are additional things that have been happening. Members of parliament adopting political prisoners was a great initiative. So all of these things help. And in the end, of course, it's what happens in Iran. But again, to quote Masih Linejad, we're not asking you in the West to save us from the regime, but we're asking you to stop saving the regime. So long as our governments, Switzerland, where I live, Canada, where I grew up, United States, Britain, so long as they speak about we still want a nuclear deal, you're saving the regime. You say we need this regime because we're going to do a deal with them. Every time you say that, you empower them, you throw them a lifeline, and that has to stop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neuer. I'm really grateful for this talk, and I'm looking forward to meet you in Brussels on Monday. We start 11:30, and hopefully we are finished with all great speakers to 2 o'clock or 2:15, hopefully. Thank you very much, sir, and I wish you a pleasant evening.
Kheli mamnoon. Thank you very much.
Merci. Merci.